It's the iRacing event that needs absolutely no introduction. 33 of the world's best sim racers, 200 laps, 800 corners, 7 pit stops, 500 miles, and a shot at sim racing immortality. It's the 11th running of the iRacing Indianapolis 500.
Imagine watching this race from that castle. It is week 10 of the Pro Mazda Championship, and we are at the Nordschleife. What an unbelievable event we've got going on here. I'm Dylan Coyle, joined alongside Arjuna Kankipati, and this is the Green Hell. From Richmond International Raceway to the Nürburgring. 20.64 kilometers, 12.825 mile circuit. We are on, just the Industriefarten track, not the Touristenfarten, unfortunately. Because, again, I'd love to see cars going through a car park if we had this on the sim. 26 degrees Celsius, 78 degrees Fahrenheit, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 Celsius on the track. And we are so close to race time right now. The group of cars, 19 are practicing. You see the championship standings coming into the week. Martin Arnoldus still on the top at 12:16. And Jerome Haag is at 11:27. Harley Lewis and Gabriel Perez are the other two in the 1,000 points, with a few of them like Maresta, Cini, and Patelkis just behind by, I don't know, probably 50 or so points. We'll see what happens after this almost wild card week, Arjuna. It's very similar to Richmond in that you don't know what to expect. This is a specialty track of sorts.
Yeah, and one thing that we often see when we come to the Nordschleife is that you get some new faces. So, someone like the Severi Seppa in the 14 car, 3,400 I rating, strong driver, but, we're going to get to see some new faces. Now, one driver who's not in the field, Jerome Haag, unfortunately for Jerome, I think his championship hopes may have been ended, and as a result, choosing not to compete in the remainder of the season, but someone who is back, Julian Dunn, previous champion and the VRS provider. He is here, and I believe he's going to be on pole position. He's had some great pace this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing, Dylan, exactly how someone like him, very strong person in this car, obviously a seasoned championship winner, how he gets on in his first race of this season. He's had a few races earlier this week, but, not really been a regular like he has been before.
Yeah, that two-time champion in Julian Dunn won both in 2017's fourth season and the 2019 season 3. And it's nice to see him here. He will be lining up on pole position, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see what everyone can do here. There's just so many differences across this entire grid. And Julian Dunn, like we said, starting on pole. David Jarvis, a full second behind in qualifying, is second. Harley Lewis and Angus Waddle are in the row number 2.
Yeah, and then you've got Ollie Peacock, who had a great finish last time out. Sorry, Dylan. To come home in second place at Richmond. Then you got championship leader Martin Arnoldus. He's going to line up second, 2.3 seconds behind Julian Dunn. Then you got Severi Seppa and Anne Medema lining up 7th and 8th.
How dare you cut me off like that? It is all good, Arjuna. Well, we do have the fifth row, that is Jean-Michael Nguyen, who's got the most points so far from this week. He's had some great skills. Dane Kenzik is starting in P10. Oldest Patelkis is starting 11th, and Pascal Filato in P12.
Yeah, then you've got Gabriel Perez, Andrea Cini, L. Leroy Coppedge, then Alessandro Amesta. So you've got quite a few of your championship regulars a little further back in the field right now.
Yeah, you do have some of them further back in the field. Ivica Lajinja, how do you want to say that, Arjuna? Is starting in 17th. Peter McCann, 18th. Topher Roberts, 19th. All the cars are getting onto the grid right now. Do apologize for any names that we do get wrong.
And we are away. Here we go. Down into turn one, Julian Dunn leads from David Jarvis, Harley Lewis, Angus Waddle, everyone going single file out front. But right now, Julian Dunn, he's already jumped to a 0.6 of a second advantage.
Yeah, Julian Dunn with that huge advantage. Remember, he qualified a second above anybody else in the field. And yes, it is a big track for that 16 kilometers, 12 miles. But a second is still a second. And that's a huge advantage. Not as big here or as it would be at other tracks. And I think that Arjuna and I were talking before the broadcast, and we'd love to hear what you think. Where besides the long 2 kilometer straightaway will cars attempt to pass on this track? I don't know if there's going to be any great passing opportunities, but you do have a massive draft with David Jarvis right on the gearbox of Julian Dunn. You can see from the helicopter view. God, this is such a beautiful track. It's so much fun if you are one of these guys in the race today.
Yeah, and Julian Dunn, the VRS coach, he was able to hold that position there, but we did see just how close David Jarvis pulled up there, and that's going to be the story of the race. How do you manage the draft? And Dylan, we saw it quite a few laps ago, I think, races ago, but this time around, similar to most sport, the driver that leads coming to the white flag might not be the best, in the best position to actually take home the race win.
Any driver who is coming into first place on the white flag, I mean, the last lap, it's a 7th of the race. It's not like most sport where the last lap was a 24th, if you want to go into fractions here. There's just so many different possibilities for how these guys are going to take this entire track. Right now, they're already 7 kilometers into the lap, and it's always exciting to see all of these cars just go through the green hell. We ride on board with Martin Arnoldus, the championship leader. When we started broadcasting the series, Martin was telling us that he is that perennial second place finisher, but he won that race at Mosport, and now he has a commanding lead in the championship. So did he jinx himself? I'm sure he'd be happy if he did.
Well, we always say on my team, under, promise and then over-deliver. So from Martin Arnoldus, one of the people, responsible for organizing these broadcasts, currently leading this championship for only what would be his second championship win. He's come in second 6 times in the championship. And so for someone like Martin, it's great to see him really having a great, run in what is the final season of this car. A little further forward, though, it is Julian Dunn who has continued to build up his gap, though. But there, a little further back, you can see this angry pack of 3 carbon cars from 3rd to 5th. That's Harley Lewis, Angus Waddle, and then Ollie Peacock. This is very menacing to almost look at, Dylan.
It is, it almost looks like an angry hornet's nest of cars that are just riding down towards the carousel, which comes up in around less than a kilometer. Arjuna and I were talking about how we should handle all of these corner names. Yes, German is a lot easier than Dutch. However, I am no German.
Yeah, and we were both on the 24 Hours of Nürburgring broadcast just a few weeks ago. And you obviously, Dylan, were in the hours before I was. But one thing that I kind of found fun was I wasn't obviously on the broadcast with you, but it was fun to hear how you pronounce some of these corner names. These drivers now coming towards the second half of the lap, up through the carousel, then through Hoa Act into some of the most fun corners on this track. But right now, Julian Dunn, he qualified on pole by, I think it was on more than a second. But David Jarvis, he's kept close, and the value of that draft, we're going to come down through the second half of the lap all the way to the Dottinger Hoe. And I think that if you are David Jarvis, Harley Lewis, you're very happy if you're only, 1.5 seconds behind Julian Dunn.
Car is going through the Hoa Acht. I got that corner right. There we go. And I'd like to know what you were laughing about me. If you talk behind my back again, I'm going to be very upset, Arjuna. But I'll allow it, because talking behind my back at a track like this, well, it's very, it's well suited for how I work here. But anyway, Julian Dunn still in the lead. Jarvis is, like you said, keeping right behind him. A little bit more of a gap has spread out here. Trying to see if there's been any moves throughout the rest of the pack. So far, everyone seems to be holding the same positions that they started the race off of. We don't get the updated numbers until they pass the line, which obviously won't be for quite a bit, as you see. Right now, zeros on the grid. Not sure if that'll be updated until we do cross the line, but a little further back in the pack, I'm looking through, there's a big group of cars right around Oldest Pateklis who is trying to make a move down the left, down the right. You see all of these drivers just down the green hell. There's just so much that can happen on this circuit as they do move through the mini carousel. And I don't think anyone will be holding their breath here. You know that a pass is going to happen down this straight as they will move into the Donjer and Arjuna. What moves do you think will happen here? A lot.
Well, here we go. David Jarvis, he's 7/10 of a second behind. He's got Harley Lewis only half a tenth behind him. Sorry, half a second behind him. I'm too busy thinking about Indy where, half a tenth is everything. But here you see David Jarvis, carbon driver. You can hear Julian Dunn. He's actually already stalled out a little bit, hitting the top of the gear range there. And here he comes. Here comes. And we're going to have it 3 wide here.
Oh boy, we're going to have almost 3 wide, but instead of going down the outside, Jarvis stayed put, but Harley Lewis from way downtown gets into first place. I did not expect that. Lewis is in P1 going down Tiergarten, and the first lap is close to its end. If you want to know how long a lap takes, the top guys here qualified around 6.5 or so minutes. It's really around that range that's going to be the biggest factor for who wins at the end of this race. And like you saw there, Lewis was a good 1.5 seconds or so behind Julian Dunn, maybe even 2 seconds when the Donjer started. But he made all of that up, and I think the big loser out of that is Jarvis because he fell back into P3. Julian Dunn fell back into P2, but he's right there. I don't think we're going to see that much of a breakaway from anybody, except for it right now. A 3-second gap has formed between 8th and 9th place. That's Medema and Jean-Michael Nguyen. And like I said at the beginning, Jean-Michael Nguyen has had the most points out of this week. Not a good haul for him if he can't make up some sort of a big deficit here. It's going to be tough, though, without the draft. You're really just fighting against the air in front of you, and if you don't have a hole punched for you, how are you going to make up the 3 seconds? I'm not sure. Oh man, are we going to have a pass for the lead on the right side? It's Julian Dunn at the sharp left-hander. It's a high-speed, fast-paced corner, but Julian Dunn gets the job done, and David Jarvis is right on the back of Harley Lewis, and Angus Waddle has decided to join the party with Ollie Peacock, Martin Arnoldis right behind them. Severi Seppa, well, he's fallen back to around 1.5 seconds behind the top 6, but just look at all of these drivers. They are literally right connected to each other. It almost looks like a train and its cargo, Arjuna.
Yeah, absolutely. And, very brave move by Julian Dunn on the outside of Schwaudenkraut. That, I said it a few times in the N24 broadcast as well. That's a very brave place to make a pass, even in what is a sprint race at just 7 laps. But to give you guys some insight into the pace that these drivers are doing, the IndyCar visited the Nürburgring and Nordschleife as well. We did have a combined layout where we did use the GP layout and some of that GP circuit as well. But, I was the second fastest qualifier in that week, and I qualified, I think, with a 6:46. So just to give you guys a little bit of, pace reference, to compare these slower Pro Mazda cars to the faster full-fledged Indy cars. But something that I noticed is that, like you say, Dylan, it's only about 3 seconds that covers your top 8 right now. And, we saw coming on the Donjer the last time around, Harley Lewis got a slingshot in that double draft. And, really, if you're anyone, even if you're Martin Arnoldis sitting in 6th place, 1.5 seconds behind the leader, it's anyone's game right now. And you have to think that with a pit stop to come and a very difficult pit entry, that you could try and make up some positions with some pit strategy as well.
Yeah, honestly, I'd be happy if I was any of them right now, because that draft and the double draft that's going to happen, honestly, we're what is this, a sextuplet draft? Because there are 6 drivers all in line. Whoever is at the farthest back, who's ever in 6th out of this entire train, which is Arnoldis, he's going to get the biggest run. So really any position is an okay position to be at. If you're in first place, well, you got that first place. As Dunn is right on the gearbox, or excuse me, that's Lewis right on the gearbox of Dunn. He went out to the outside, was thinking about a move, but was at the grass. You've got to be so careful because there's some very deceitful curbs. You shouldn't go on them, but it feels like you should because they are on the outside or inside of corners. As they go around this carousel, it's so hard to get this right because if you go on the outside of it, as Peacock kind of did at the end, he kind of messed that final part of the carousel up. But if you are at the, if you were going too slow around the carousel, well, it's going to be really easy to have a lot of oversteer, but it's also at the same time, depending on your speed, easy to get some understeer as Lewis falls back to Dunn a bit in the second half of this map. And yeah, that oversteer and understeer, you got to find a balance. Arjuna, with the IndyCar here, what is the key, you would say, to making sure you find that balance?
Well, what we see right now is if we go and ride with Harley Lewis, who's got David Jarvis right behind him, but you can, I think, kind of see, if I can finally get that camera switched. There we go. A little late in the second half of the lap, but the place where you make up the most time is this second half of the lap, and Julian Dunn has got immense confidence here. We saw Harley Lewis just coming out of that last corner, touching the curb on the outside, and that's known as the ice curve. That's not something you want to be doing at all. So what I'm really seeing here is Julian Dunn, he's got some really good pace right now. He's got about 1.6 seconds of a lead. It's going to be hard to catch coming on the Dottinger this time around, but if I'm Harley Lewis, I'm looking behind me. I see David Jarvis, Angus Waddle, Ollie Peacock, Martin Allnotice. The names go on and on and on. I'm going to start getting worried, and that's when you start to push just that little bit more, and that's when you get caught out here. It's when you start to get a little bit too much confidence. As in the background, David Jarvis almost popped out of the second carousel, and now he's going to have to deal with Angus Waddle and Ollie Peacock coming and swarming him on this straight.
I'm going to have to cut you off. Martin Arnoldis has crashed out. He is out of this race. He hit hard the outside wall. I'm not exactly sure where it was. It might have been right next to the mini carousel, but he is out of the race. The championship leader here on our broadcast as we catch the replay. He should be he was just too much speed coming out of the mini carousel, and that's going to cost you mightily. If we try join back here on some live action, we've got a three-way battle between Waddle, Peacock, and Jarvis. Who's going to be the winner and get into P3? Well, it looks like it's going to be Waddle, and Julian Dunn has lost a lot of time to Harley Lewis as we end lap 2 at the end of the Dottinger Hohe. So even if you've got a 2-second or 1.5 second advantage, it really won't matter because that is such a big map to get to, a big straight that you're just not going to be able to find. And it's Hoa, I should say, not Hohe, American speaking.
Yeah, and you know, that's what the power of the draft is here. Julian Dunn had a 1.7 second advantage coming through Galgenkopf, and on that Dottinger Hoa, you lost all of that advantage right now. But it's very interesting. Now that Martin Allnotice has had his unfortunate accident, what it does mean is that now we only have 5 cars in this lead battle. So Julian Dunn leads from Harley Lewis. Then you've got Angus Waddle, Ollie Peacock, and David Jarvis has slipped to the rear of this little battle right now. So, you know, well, lap 3 out of 7, expect pit stops to start. I think this time around, maybe some drivers thinking slightly differently on the strategy. And I did refer to it a little bit earlier, Dylan, but that pit entry in this particular layout, very difficult. The pit entry very small, and it does require you to be very careful on the entry.
Yeah, and that is something we forgot to mention, that there will be one pit stop throughout the rest of this race. I'm trying to see, there already seems to be a lot of drivers who are just out of the race. Alessandro Maresta, he's out. He has a lot of damage. I don't think Oldest Patapoulos is in either, and Medina looks like is out, and of course Arnoldis as well. Wow, that is a lot. Pascal Filato, he is out of the race, so a lot of big names, they are done, all in the span of about 1 lap's time. The Green Hell, it takes no prisoners.
Yeah, absolutely not. And that's something that I think a lot of these drivers have been aware of throughout the week. And it's something that, we saw in the Indy cars here as well. What you find is that, especially when you have qualifying being a separate, race session compared to the race itself, what you find is that some drivers have a lot of pace in that qualifying session, but then put them in a race situation where they have to do 7 laps at that same pace level. They can struggle. And I'm not trying to point any fingers here because this is one of the toughest tracks in the world. But for Martin Alnerdis, who I think was really looking forward to this week, this is one of the weeks that he was talking about how he wishes he could race more and more. Like, he just wants more and more time. But sometimes you just get caught out. And for Martin Alnerdis, that second carousel, that was the, race ender for him.
Yeah, it was the race ender as the group of 5 do go through the sharp right-hander in just a second called Bergwerk, one of the only corners I can name consistently. Ollie Peacock, David Jarvis, you see that gap. It's 8/10 at the second. Jarvis, remember, was fighting at P2 and has lost out considerably of this top 5 group. Arjuna, you have something?
Yeah, so just something very important. Bergwerk is one of the most important corners on this track. You can see David Jarvis. He didn't get a good exit there at all. Tried to get on the power too early, understeered wide. And you can see that even with this mighty draft that he must have, he's not really closing on the cars in front of him. But what you are seeing is that we now have a 4-way fight for the lead. They're all separated by less than half a second.
Oh, they're looking at making some moves at the end of this 2-kilometer straight. Harley Lewis lost some time, and Angus Waddle was looking to capitalize down the inside. That could have been very costly. Come on, guys. Good racing here. We want to battle to the very end of this race, unlike Zandvoort. Julian Dunn still holds the lead into the carousel. All the cars coming through there so far very cleanly, and they exited cleanly. You mentioned Bergwerk being one of the most important and integral corners on the entire circuit, and we just saw why. There's 2 kilometers of just free track, clear track. You don't have to make you don't have to hit the brakes at all. Obviously, as you hit this second sector, second half of the lap, we start to get more of that once we get to the Danger Hoa. And I do think that all these guys are starting to get a little bit aggressive, a little racy, which surprises me because it is still such a long track, such a long race, and with pit stops coming up, which can lead to, again, a lot of time gained or lost. Do you want to throw it out at the very midpoint of the race?
Well, I think what a lot of people maybe are finding out if they're just tuning onto this broadcast for the first time is that you don't just fight the track here, but you can get some great racing as well, especially when you have as powerful a draft as we have right now. And we watch Julian Dunn. This is where he is strongest. This is where he makes up the most time. The gap behind to Harley Lewis now 1.4 seconds. We saw that going through the carousel, for example. It was down to just 0.2 of a second. So, Dylan, if I'm someone like Julian Dunn, this is where you have to balance that risk versus reward, obviously. Now, you have significant speed in the second half of the lap coming through the second carousel. Very careful, very gingerly tiptoeing the car through that corner. But now you come to this back straight where you have a 1.5 second advantage. And now we're going to see, let's go ahead and bring up the graphic. We're going to see just how that comes down on this main straight right now. Let's see if we can also look at that battle for third. I think we're going to see Angus Waddle and Ollie Peacock right now. They're going to also close up, but we can see the effect of the draft right now. And maybe we'll also see some pit stops as we come across the line one more time.
I absolutely love the idea of using that live timing gap graphic because you're really able to see what that difference does come to. They're all very spaced out right now, so I don't think there's going to be any passes or fights for position. I think all of them might be thinking pits. I'm not exactly sure because they were not aggressive on that long straight. Remember, like you said, it's a very difficult pit lane to get into. No one dives down into it, so another lap. Maybe they're all thinking that they want to go all out on that second part of the race, and maybe they're all just thinking, hey, well, we've got the draft working for us right now. It's going to save us a ton of fuel. The only problem is with the Nordschleife is that if you make the decision not to go down pit road, well, you better make sure you've got 14 or so miles or kilometers, whatever you want to say, of fuel still remaining, because that's how big one laps. It's a lot riskier to stay out or go in and dive in and have to run a few more laps on one tank of fuel than it is at most tracks.
Yeah, and if I was being honest, the only driver that I was really thinking maybe would come down the lane was Julian Dunn out front. Now, if you're any of the cars behind him, you know that you might not have the same raw performance as Julian does, but you know that as long as you have his draft, you're going to be in a good position. And so if you are Julian out front, you've been leading pretty comfortably, only had to fight off a few moves here and there, but, why not maybe come down a lap early, break that draft for the drivers behind, force them to put the pressure on and have to go fast, on one lap, and then you have the track to yourself. You have a clean, lap, no one behind you to really worry about making a move. But here we go, down through the foxhole into the compression and towards Adenauer Forest. You can see these three carbon drivers. They're second, third, and I think fourth right now. They're looking a little bit feisty.
Oh, they're looking feisty right here through Foxhole. You have to be so careful because after such a fast downhill section, you've got to slow down and take a few more twists before you can get back on the gas and move towards another slower section. Foxhole is one of those straights on here. Yes, it's not completely straight, but it's one where you can feel semi-confident about passing in, just like that 2 kilometer straight after Bergwerk, which will come up in a couple kilometers here. It's funny. Oh, there's a big wreck. Julian Dunn gets into the wall. He's out of the race. He is out of the fight for the lead. What a huge calamity. What a huge mistake for the top driver in this race.
Yeah, he'd been having it so easy as well, and I think it was the curb on the left-hand side that catches him out here. Yep, riding on board, you can see there. And we're going to try and take one more look at it, in fact, because that was a very good job by some of the other drivers to not get involved and avoid him. So, for Angus Waddle, Ollie Peacock, they did a good job there not to run into him.
Wow. He is stopped on the track after continuing for a half kilometer more, and he is out of the race. I think something with the suspension is gone. Wow. That is unbelievable. No one expected that, especially from a driver of his caliber at this track. So the guy who qualified on the pole is gone. The guy who is in the lead in the championship is gone. And now it's a fight to see who can close the gap on everybody here. That is remarkable, Arjuna, as you see down the outside, taking a little peek at Waddle, or Lewis was Waddle. Waddle has Peacock right on his gearbox. And now the battle for whoever would get to P1 has fallen to just 4 drivers. I think that's these 4 drivers, Lewis, Waddle, Peacock, and Jarvis. These are the 4 men we're going to actually see with a chance to take this lead. I would never have guessed it to be Dunn or Arnoldus that would be the casualties of this lead battle, Arjuna. I'm still in shock that mistake with the curbing on the outside. Remember, it's deceivious, it's deceitful, and that happens.
Yeah, and it can happen to all of us, very unfortunately. This is a track that, I have a lot of experience in, but, even racing the 24 hours this year myself, I made 2 errors, not just 1, but 2. And fortunately for me, in a long endurance race, you can get that car repaired, get back on traps, keep pounding away with the laps. But if you're Julian Dunn, he's still on the pit lane trying to get some repairs done right now. But, when you only have a 7-lap race, not much you can do. And I would 100% agree with you, Dylan. I'm very surprised that it was Julian and Martin, 2 drivers who I know have a lot of confidence at this track and a lot of experience. But, I'm just thinking a little bit further back to Martin's incident. He obviously had the incident at that second carousel. And I know from reading on the forums that, that's not a corner he's had the most confidence at, So sometimes, you just get in your own head, especially at a track as long as this. I know that you can start getting boogie corners, for lack of a better word. You can start getting intimidated when you come up to a certain corner. And in such a long lap, you get so worried about it. But right now we see here Harley Lewis, he's pulled away a little bit. And Ollie Peacock right on Angus Waddle's rear wing. It is a Carbon Racing 1-2-3. And David Jarvis, I think, looking to spoil that party.
Well, I think this plays out for Harley Lewis exactly as Lewis would have wanted it to play out, because he has collected a lot of points this week. And could he be the only guy who gives Arnoldus any bit of a run for, the championship? High possibility he's in first. Obviously, it's by like a second or a second and a half, but that gap will go down so much as we see Ollie Peacock on board with him, getting passed by David Jarvis on the right. Not sure if it's going to hold going down in the Tiergarten. Oh, man, you just top out at around 150 miles per hour when you're not in the draft. And also coming into Tiergarten, you can see there's that uphill section and just falling back in the line. But downhill, Waddle's going to have to contend with Peacock coming down the left. And you can imagine everyone is going to go down the pits at the end of 4 laps here. Or no, they do not. Well, Arjuna, what do you think about the strategy here?
Well, if it were me, I would have tried to split it in 2. But, for, again, all these drivers right now, as we say that, though, Dylan, one driver who has come down the pit lane, let's go and take a look at him, David Jarvis. And so David, one of the drivers choosing to come down. One thing that you have to remember, Dylan, is you can save a lot of fuel when you're stuck in that draft. And so, for someone like Ollie Peacock, who's been riding around in about 5th place for most of the race, maybe he saved quite a lot of fuel. And something else to consider is, now that he's out on track with 3 of his teammates, maybe he's going to have a little bit of a shorter fill time. Maybe he's going to be able to jump his teammate, Angus Waddle, to move himself up into 2nd. But interesting strategy call from David. Obviously now he's got to prove that he's got the pace by himself. No longer has the draft to assist him. And so now he's basically got to match the pace of Harley Lewis, who leads this motor race lap 5 out of 7.
Well, luckily for Jarvis, he actually has 2 draft partners right in front of him in Jean-Michael Nguyen and Alessandro Maresta, who is still in the race, came into the lap a lap down. So he's going to get the benefit of the draft. Not sure if he took some fresh tires. Oh, as there's a wreck almost right in front of Jarvis. He's going to have to slow down. Both Maresta and Jean-Michael Nguyen got into the grass and almost hit each other. Well, draft partners are not always the most helpful thing.
Yeah, let's go take a look at this replay because it sounds kind of interesting. But David Jarvis, now that he's out on his outlap, some very interesting things happening to him. Here we'll get a replay of it. Coming down towards Schroudenkrautz, this long downhill run. There it is. Oh, that's so unfortunate. Miscommunication there. But fortunately for David Jarvis, he's managed to get through that cleanly, Dylan. So for him, he's lost some time, and that is definitely going to affect him as he tries to catch up with the 3 Carbon Racing drivers.
I do have to say, though, what a great recovery from Jean-Michael Nguyen, because he ran into the grass. He had such a big run on Maresta, who also, I must say, he's also a lap down, so it's not for position. Not sure why he's getting in the way there, but Jean-Michael Nguyen went into the grass in a high-speed section at the Green Hell and lived to tell about it. That is remarkable.
Yeah, well, something that I don't want... Oh, as Harley Lewis, he got a big old slide coming over the hill there, but fortunately able to save that one. But something that you have to remember with these Pro Mazdas, they are on the older tire model, and that does mean they're a little bit more forgiving on the grass. Now, I'm not trying to take any credit away from that magnificent save, but, I have to think, maybe on the newer tire model, the second you go out onto that grass, it's like you're driving on ice.
Oh, we might get a pass down the right side. Angus Waddle side by side with Lewis. Some clean driving, and into the lead goes Waddle. Has not cleared Lewis, though, and it appears that finally, yes, there is some space between the 2 drivers. So Waddle will go into P1. And again, coming out of Bergwerk, that is what happens when you've got a good exit, look at that huge amount of track that you've just got to go flat out down before you get into the carousel section. Just 3 drivers here. I wonder, you know, probably not much because it is a slow section. I wonder how much some dirty air comes into play. Probably not much. They're going at 60 miles per hour, so aerodynamics really doesn't come into play there, more just mechanical grip. But nonetheless, top 3, they are still riding together and will only need to fuel up for 2 extra laps here, which I'm not exactly sure how fast they will be with everything considered. I wonder how much that slide in front of David Jarvis will slow him down, because you got to imagine, while it was an interesting strategy call, if he does come out a little bit behind the top 3, you can blame it on that incident occurring right in front of him. We say 3 to go here on the race spot graphic system, but we've really got around, what do you want to say, 18 minutes left of a race?
Yeah, and we still got pit stops to go, so I'm very curious to see what's going to happen here. When you have 3 cars, you know, charging into that pit lane, all it's going to take is for Angus Waddle to make a slight mistake, and then you've got 3 cars suddenly out of the race. So, you know, Dylan, I think we are going to have the battle here up, you know, just between these 3 drivers. David Jarvis, I think, lost a bit too much time with that incident, but all it takes is 1 mistake. Right now, though, Angus Waddle, he's shown some good pace in the second half of the lap. And you go back to the dirty air thing, something that some of these drivers have to deal with through this higher speed corners is that dirty air. Now, you have a lot of draft, but you also have to contend with the dirty air. And, you know, so far, though, Dylan, no one's really been caught out by it so far.
But somebody has! It's going to be Angus Waddle who goes off track. Again, the mini carousel is taking some victims, but Waddle is okay. He is still riding in P3, lost about a second. But wow, that is what Martin Arnoldis wishes happened. Wow. You see, you get to the inside of the mini carousel, but great recovery going into the Dottinger Hoa, and Harley Lewis is back in the lead with Ollie Peacock, who has been riding at the back of this lead group for most of the race, going down the outside, going into Tiergarten. Oh man, who is going to blink first? Peacock and Lewis still side by side. You got to imagine if they're staying side by side here, it really helps Peacock when it does come down to pits, as now Peacock goes into the lead, and look who's right back into this battle. It's Waddle. They all dive down into this very tight pit lane. What is the gap between these guys and David Jarvis, who's going into Tiergarten?
Well, I wanted to try and bring up a track map, but unfortunately we don't have a graphic. Let's go ahead and take a look over at David Jarvis. Where is he? He's coming through Tiergarten towards Hohenrain now, and I think he's a little too far behind. The driver,
I don't know. He might have played this well. Harley Lewis starts to come out of the pits. Where's Jarvis? Jarvis is in P1. He played it perfectly. David Jarvis, even with the mistake that happened in front of him by probably 1/10, gets into first place. Talk about a great strategy.
Yeah, and even with that spin, able to get that done. So maybe a great lap from David Jarvis there. We did see a few of the front 3 drivers making mistakes. Speaking of mistakes, Ollie Peacock still on the lane. I believe busted for a speeding penalty, and that's going to bump him all the way to 8th right now, and that's got to be heartbreaking for him. He was having such a good race, keeping the car so clean, and with 2 laps to go, out of the fight for the race win.
Wow, so mistakes, there have been so many of them in this race. You know, Arjuna, I owe you money. I thought this race would be spaced out more than I thought it. I thought it would be more spaced out. Obviously, it isn't, as there is now a battle for the lead. Waddle on the outside. Oh, gets loose. Oh man, coming out of Foxhole, he got loose down the inside, but does he take the lead away from Jarvis? He does. I'm still amazed at David Jarvis's strategy.
Great strategy call, but what a pass by Angus Waddle there, and you saw just how dangerous the outside line in Schwaudenkrautz can be. Angus Waddle getting very loose there in his number 1 car, able to hold on to it, and now we dive into Arnau Forest, And we're going to have a good fight here, I think, Dylan. 3 cars. I think if I'm Harley Lewis right on the tail of them, I'm pretty happy right now. We saw the power of the double draft, as I'm going to now refer to it. And so, all it takes is a really good run through Galgum on that last lap, and Harley Lewis could be in the prime position to take the race win home.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you noticed, there is another driver lurking in the background in P4. That is Severi Seppa, who is not even showing within the top 30 in the standings here. So he's one of those Nordschleife ringers, and he has the possibility of a podium if there's any more mistakes, which could very well happen from the top 3. And you also have to remember, Harley Lewis, how much do you want to push the issue? Because yes, you're racing for a win, but you're also racing for a huge hole of points and a chance to possibly fight Arnoldus for the championship. It is well within reach here, Arjuna.
No, and that's a very good point you actually bring up, Dylan. Harley Lewis, he's only about 200 points behind Martin Arnoldus coming into this race, and I'm not 100% sure about the points on offer, but I'm fairly confident in saying that this might be one of the strongest fields that Pro Mazda has seen this season. The Nordschleife, like you say, brings out all the ringers, and there will be some good points here on offer. So if Harley Lewis can make his way up into first, that, like you say, that's his. That would be a good opportunity to try and claw some of that gap back to Martin Arnoldus. He's currently on the pit lane, Martin Arnoldus. He hasn't managed to get back out. So, he's going to finish in 17th position. That's basically going to be one of his 4 drop weeks, I think. Although, Dylan, you've been looking at some of the numbers for this week, and maybe you can tell me, maybe Martin has had some previous good results that are going to, count towards his championship hopes.
So if we are looking at some previous results from this week, has Arnoldus done anything well? Well, I can tell you, not really. He is not even showing. I'm doing a quick look through of the top 20 in points. He is not within the top 20 in points that have been gathered from this week. And if I look for Harley Lewis's name, well, Harley Lewis coming into today, 6th place out of all the drivers in point holes for this week, week 10, the Nordschleife. That is, it's getting very spicy here, Arjuna, and I think it will remain this way if they are able to have a good battle at Silverstone next weekend. Just to remind everybody, after this week, there is Silverstone as the penultimate race, and then week 12, the final race, will be at Road Atlanta. What an amazing circuit that will be to all of these guys take to it. That, oh man, it snakes around in the first sector. It's just such a fun track to watch. And obviously Silverstone, I'm sure you're going to see more passes than you've seen from any broadcast of the Pro Mazda race that we have done this season. And Arjuna, I feel like you might agree with me there.
Yeah, we've had a great run of races here to, commemorate the Pro Mazda's, service in iRacing. It feels like a good way to use that word, to be honest. But, we started off at Mosport. We had that Richmond race. Now we're here at the Nordschleife. We also had Zandvoort, I can't forget, a week before. But we're going to finish here with some of the greatest tracks, in my opinion. Obviously, the Nordschleife, I can't make it clear just how much I love this track. But then Silverstone, obviously very historic, and like you say, we're going to get some great racing there. And then Road Atlanta, very interesting combo for these cars. It races very well in the IndyCar, and I expect it to do the same here. But now here we go, Dylan. It's going to be a draft race here. We're going to come to the white flag, and again, I wouldn't want to be the person who leads across the line this time around. So let's see what happens. Angus Waddle, David Jarvis drafting up to him, and here comes Harley Lewis as well.
Oh boy, they're not going to make it 3 wide, right? Harley Lewis isn't going to try to make it 3 wide, right? Yeah, he just slowed down 10 miles per hour to prevent anything happening going into Tiergarten. Look at that beautiful shot, and into the lead, it remains Angus Waddle. So he was able to fight off David Jarvis at the end of the Dodger Hoa as we do roll around into lap 7, the final lap of this race. We still have a 6.5-minute lap time to contend with as we cross the line. Angus Waddle, David Jarvis, Harley Lewis are your top 3, and Seppa is not too far behind, only 4 seconds or 5 seconds behind Lewis in P4, and we haven't seen anyone else cross the line yet. Ollie Peacock actually is just still, he's, even with the penalty, he's in 6th place. So while, yes, he lost the chance to contend for the lead, it's Jean-Michael Nguyen and Peacock that are fighting for P5, it appears, or actually P7, as there's some, we didn't get the update still right now, but Andrea Cini is in P5 with Dane Nezik in P6 and fighting for that. Yes, Peacock is in 8th, but he can fight for 7th, like you said originally. My huge mistake there, Arjun.
Yeah, but here we go. I noticed Harley Lewis making a small mistake through the Hudson back, and then Angus Waddle makes a small mistake on the, I think that's technically Flugplatz, the actual right-hander, the second right-hander there, but able to hold on to lead, and again, coming through the Tiergarten that last time, Dylan, I think both David Jarvis and Harley Lewis were hanging back just a little bit. We definitely saw Harley Lewis lifting out of the throttle, but as soon as David Jarvis got out of that draft, I'm pretty sure he as well just backed off a little bit, made sure Angus Waddle was in front of him, and now let's see what happens. Maybe he's going to have a move down towards Bravery. Here we go towards Adenauer Forest. He took a look, but nothing happening there.
Oh, and he lost a lot of time there for Harley Lewis to maybe pounce on Jarvis. You know, I think if any of these drivers make a move into P1 before they get to the Danger Hoa, I think it wouldn't be smart. I think that's why you're seeing the 2 drivers in P2 and 3 just falling back a little bit, playing a little bit of follow the leader. The Nordschleife is as much about winning as it is surviving. And we've already seen 3 of that 6 car battle in the beginning fall out, whether due to speeding in pit road or making mistakes that end the race. So I think that because they might not be racing as hard against each other until we get to the Hoa, I think that they might be, they're not going to be prone to as many mistakes because of that draft. They're not going to be pushing it, but they do have to make sure that Waddle does not get as big of a lead where it's going to be too difficult to pass. And I will also say this, if you are Severi Seppa, just watch. There's a 3-wide battle going into the Tiergarten hill, or the, I guess you could say the downhill part of the track. Could you see these guys going 3-wide at the end of the straight?
Oh, 100%. But actually here, I think it's going to be very interesting. Angus Waddle not getting a great exit out of Bergwick at all. But we did see David Jarvis was struggling a little bit, and Harley Lewis really all over him. But right now, if I was Harley Lewis, I was going to say I was going to try and make a move here to get past David Jarvis and just, put yourself in a good position. But instead, what we're going to see is David Jarvis really closing on Angus Waddle. Something's happened here to Angus. He's really slow.
Angus Waddle has definitely slowed down. I'm not sure if it's anything, though, to do with the car mechanically. I think it just might be that draft from Jarvis. Man, Harley Lewis, like you said, it might not be too much of a fallacy to make a move on Jarvis. I just think that if you don't get the chance, then if you don't get a clear chance, that it might not be so smart to really force a move before you get to that long straight. And Angus Waddle has to contend with Jarvis being so aggressive, so racy behind him as we march into this second half of the lap, the final lap here at the Nordschleife. And oh boy, this is going to be really nail-biting here at the end.
Yeah, this is going to be a good finish. Again, David Jarvis struggling a little bit. And actually, I just got a brief look there, but I think David Jarvis might have a little bit of left rear damage. It definitely looks as though some contact was made there.
I think there might be. You know what? You might be right. I can't quite see. It looks a little bit crooked, but that might just be my eyesight because I'm not wearing glasses at the moment. But into this second half.
Well,
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, sorry. The reason that becomes important, Dylan, is maybe he took some damage going over some of these curbs. You mentioned it briefly at one point. The curbs here, they're almost like a skyscraper in some ways. They're almost vertical. And so if you get on them in the wrong way, maybe you take that jump a little bit wrongly, you're going to damage your car. And I think that's what's really costing him here now. Maybe Angus Waddle has similar damage that's affecting his top-end performance, but we're going to see here, they're coming through the Beloff S's for the last time. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a draft run all the way down into that last corner.
Yes, the mini carousel, the place of nightmares for a few drivers, has it's taken two of them almost out of the race completely. They all go through it pretty fine. One more right-hander, and then the long backstretch. The Dottinger Hoa is going to be the place where all of these drivers will have to show who has the guts to go maybe 2 wide, 3 wide. As you see, Waddle tries to break the draft, but following right behind is Jarvis and Lewis. Do you think anyone has the pace to catch up to Waddle? I think Lewis has the pace to catch up to Jarvis, but they're all catching up to Waddle in front. Oh man, what's going to happen here? Going in to the last few corners, they're 3 wide. Who is in the lead? It's Lewis on the outside who is in the lead at the moment. Waddle drops in behind Jarvis, who lost out the biggest, into P3. Oh man, going into the final few corners, they're still side by side. Jarvis and Lewis, who's going to come out the victor? Lewis, who is looking to get back into this championship hunt, goes into P1, one more corner, and it's going to be Harley Lewis who wins at the Nordschleife. Came into the final few kilometers in 3rd place, and it's almost a complete difference. It is a complete reversal of the top 3 in the finishing order. Arjuna, gutsy.
Wow, what a great job. We saw the power of that double draft. And something else that's just happened, Andrea Cini, I think he just got past Dane Kensick to get 5th place. So not just action happening out front, but some good racing there. But I think, Dylan, that was fantastic. They almost managed to touch just before they went under the bridge, but they got themselves sorted out, and Harley Lewis takes home a well-deserved win.
Yes, he did take home a well-deserved win, and Andrea Cini actually started in P14 and finished P5. So everyone seems to have crossed the line here. It could have taken a lot longer. Actually, Peter McCann is still on track. It looks like he's going to be the final finisher. We can finally get that grid to come up, or the finishing the lineup. We see the race results. It's going to be Harley Lewis, the winner. David Jarvis, Angus Waddle within a half second of P1. Severy Seppa, great job from the Finnish driver. 6 seconds behind. Andrea Cini and Dane Nezik are within a second of each other. Ali Peacock did get P7, so good job for him. Jean-Michael Nguyen definitely made a mistake that cost him 7th, and he drops back into 8th. Peter McCann 9th, and Laginja is in P10. And it's funny, I'm actually still watching Ivica, we'll call him that. He's still racing to end this one, but he's the only driver still in the lead lap that hasn't finished. Gabriel Perez a lap down, and Kopage is in P12. Roberts, Dunn, Resta, Medema, Arnolis, Pateklis, and Filato all come out big losers on the day. And Arjuna, I'm still watching him as Ivica still has that final corner to negotiate to certify that he, yes, finishes P10. This is such a big lap here. What a race. What a big, just a great race. I was not expecting all these drivers to stay as close as they did, but the draft fest, the drafting abilities of this car, it is so much fun to watch.
Yeah, we got a great race there for us. 7 laps of pure carnage in a lot of ways. Some attrition, some great passes, but hopefully we'll get a chance, after this in the post-race show to talk to maybe Harley Lewis, maybe Martin Alnordis will show up just so we can talk to him about his incident a little bit more. He may not want to relive it, unfortunately, but it might just be good to hear his thoughts as we move into the last 2 weeks of the season.
And David Jarvis almost made his great strategy call a winner. and obviously he fell 3/10 short. But he ends the race where he started, P2, which I think he's actually the only driver to do that in the field, to start where they finished. So, wow, what a race. What a fantastic race. We'll have to debrief this all right after a few commercials, a few messages from iRacing. What a race, Arjuna. But we will come in the post-race show in just a few moments here on RaceSpotTV.
It's the iRacing event that needs absolutely no introduction. 33 of the world's best sim racers, 200 laps, 800 corners, 7 pit stops, 500 miles, and a shot at sim racing immortality. It's the 11th running of the iRacing Indianapolis 500.
Coming up to the line, being chased, and it was Braden Johnson.
Unbelievable finish.
It was 1/1000th of a second between them.
Green flag in the air. We are racing in the 2020 24 Hours of Daytona.
They go door to door for the feature race lead here on the last lap of the race. Side by side for the race lead in the final corner at Homestead.
Down the back straightaway, 3 wide again for the race lead. This is unbelievable stuff here tonight.
Aloma is going to have to be very deep on the brakes, and he is very deep on the brakes. It's side by side through the corner. This is for the win.
It'll be side by side. Davies low, Ottinger high. To the very inside is Garrett Low. 4 wide at the stripe. For Audie's win here on this outside line. Neck and neck. Who's going to back out? Does anyone back out? Verstappen starts to squeeze on the inside, and now he'll try and straight line it. Goes under the apron. Drag race to the line. It's so close to call.
Well, Harley Lewis is the winner after a wild 7 laps at the Nordschleife, and not quite the 24 hours, but I'm sure for some of these guys, they will be sad that they didn't even make it to the 24-minute mark of this race. But Harley Lewis is the best driver in the field, and we're joined alongside Harley right now. First of all, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. Well, Harley, you made a very gutsy move going down in the Tiergarten. How do you feel about it after it's over?
I'm still shaking a little bit, but to be honest, if David Jarvis really wanted to take that and throw it up the inside, I'm pretty sure he would have won that race. So I guess I owe him a huge thank you for not licking the stamp and sending it.
I love that, the Daniel Ricciardo reference right there. So you have really cemented yourself in the final couple weeks of this series as a potential championship contender. You've never had a championship in this series behind you right now, but you're catching up to Martin Arnoldis.
I think he's still pretty safe. If I would have done well last week, unfortunately, took a little bit too much inside curb at Zandvoort, and that was pretty fatal. So I think he's pretty safe, but, we'll do everything we can to try to catch him.
Yeah, David, great job there. And we're just watching a replay of, your last lap heroics there using that double draft. Now, I wanted to ask you what you were kind of thinking coming, onto the lap before, because you kind of actually backed out of making it 3 wide. Were you just kind of thinking that you'd stay behind and, do exactly what you did and make a true slingshot on that last lap?
Yeah, there was no point of risking it any earlier, and I knew the draft 3 back was going to be immense, so I just kind of waited, lifted and waited, and I've had some bad luck at this track this week, so I was really scared I was going to crash somewhere, just kind of like Julian did, just hit a landmine out of nowhere, and it's over.
Well, Harley, anybody that you'd like to thank?
Well, David Jarvis, Angus Waddell, Carbon Racing, you guys for doing the broadcast here, and everybody else that shows up every week in the Pro Mazda that I'm going to miss when this car retires. Well,
we never usually get on-air thanks, but we really appreciate that. Again, congrats, Harley, and what a race from you.
Thank you.
So, Arjuna, we have 2 more races left in this entire series before this car is retired from official iRacing events, and we're certainly going to miss it. Silverstone, next Friday, same exact starting time, May 22nd, and then the week after that, the finale is Road Atlanta, which, it might be somewhat overshadowed by some other American racing circuits, but Road Atlanta is such a fun track to drive, and I think both of these tracks we're going to see some unbelievable action.
Yeah, I mean, let's be fair, Dylan. We've only called, this is our 4th race this season, and all 4 of them have basically been fireburners, so I'm not expecting that to change as we go to some of the classic tracks. And as someone who used to live not too far from Road Atlanta, I have a soft spot for it, and like I was saying, it's a track that races very well in an IndyCar. Now, you'd think that those first S's not necessarily the most suited to an open wheel car, maybe touching those curbs, but I'm excited to see it. It's going to be a very, touching moment for, I think, a lot of these drivers effectively saying goodbye to this car for the last time in that race. But, Road to Indy, Road Atlanta, it's not the perfect track maybe, but it's going to be a really fitting farewell for this car.
It absolutely is. And just so you know, everyone watching, Ollie Peacock, so not only did he miss getting the pit limiter on, he accidentally left his tires checked, and his tires were changed.
Oh, no.
So a bunch of time was wasted from doing that. But c'est la vie, he still finishes in P7. Thank you to everyone who watch these broadcasts week in and week out. 2 more to go, but this has been the Nordschleife in Pro Mazda Championship. Presentation by RaceSpotTV. I'm Dylan Coyle, Arjuna Kenkibati, doing both commentary and behind-the-scenes work. And thank you again all for watching. Take care, and we'll see you next week.